All right. If you are not seated and want to be seated, come be seated. I'm going to stay down here just because we've already kind of got things ready here. Our next session is Sarah Grace. All right. So our next session is with Sarah Grace from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and she's going to be talking about making the complex understandable, storytelling through digital media, multimedia, and design. So we had a conversation just the other day, and I think you're gonna show the cool picture, right? Yes, the answer is yes. So you're gonna be very impressed with what she does to make, I think, information that otherwise is really, really complex for policymakers and for others kind of generally able to understand things that help them make sense and then be able to act on it. So let me turn the stage over to Sarah. She will present for a little while, then we'll have a little bit of space, some moderated conversation, and then Q&A. So let me give it over to Sarah Grace.
Awesome, thank you so much, Tim. Really happy to be here today, talking about what is, I think, the coolest kind of convergence of a bunch of different areas of multimedia, journalism, policy, storytelling. So let's go ahead and get started. So just at the top, the program I'm using is Whimsical. This is not a very linear topic. There's a lot of overlapping areas, so I figured this would be a pretty easy way to kind of expand and contract as we get into things. So for run of show, I'm going to start out with a little bit of context and background, give a little bit of an introduction to this as an area. The majority of the presentation, I'll be talking about the philosophy and practice of actually making these, and then I'll summarize things at the end, and then we'll have a bit of a conversation with Tim. So to start out with, I work at a think tank in DC called the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which is absolutely a mouthful, CSIS for short. I work in the in-house design and data visualization production agency there, and what I make are called digital reports. So a couple of examples of these, which are essentially multimedia-rich policy storytelling. And we'll pray that the Wi-Fi works with this. This is actually a video, that's okay. But basically, these are colorful, engaging, media-rich pieces that work just as well on mobile as they do on desktop. It's a way of bringing a white paper to life and hopefully making it accessible and engaging for a general audience. There's usually a fair amount of data visualizations of various types. We're ideally looking to reach multiple types of audiences who like to get their content in different ways. And we're breaking up and segmenting the content in a way that should be intuitive, have good narrative flow, and be engaging as you move throughout the piece and hopefully dig deep on a topic that maybe wasn't something that you ever thought you would be interested in. These vary a lot. We have a bunch of different research areas. So we have everything from water security to kind of technology. We work a lot on different conflicts that are happening around the world. And we vary the tone of these pieces to suit the content. So for example, while this piece was very much about climate change and had a palette that reflected that, this one is essentially about the pretty unique experience of having a very digitally focused population be experiencing what the people in Ukraine are experiencing right now. So there have been a lot of opportunities to help people because of that digital connectivity, but unfortunately there have also been malicious actors that are taking advantage of that. So this is a piece that inventories that. And as you can see, the content is really kind of focusing on different ways to reinforce the narrative through visual components and also through interactivity. So we have a breakdown of different ways that people have been using their phones. And this is a fun interactive that feels a little bit goofy when you're actually on mobile, but was very fun to make. And then we got a little bit literal here and actually made the digital landscape that people are traversing. So I think different ways of integrating visuals and multimedia into your storytelling can really leave an impact in a way that even the most incredibly written white paper or analysis or journalistic article maybe not quite be able to reach. So we also do a lot of work on defense, and this was a piece from, I believe, a year and a half ago. Oh, and that's not loading. That's okay. So basically, the piece centers around a war game that CSIS ran that was basically all about how long the U.S. would have before we ran out of munitions if something were to ignite. And the answer was not long. The answer was 7 days. So this, if this were playing, this actually animates and shows, oh, there we go. So each missile represents 500 missiles, and it actually takes you through the progression of when we would run out. So the overall tone of the piece is about establishing credible deterrence. And the overall aesthetic that we were going for was a 1980s movie starring Matthew Broderick called War Games. Highly recommended if you haven't seen it. And essentially, as you can see, we're integrating a mix of photos, text treatments, data visualizations, and just kind of general interactivity and kind of an overall aesthetic to reinforce the narrative. So that's really what these pieces are about. If you'd like to see more examples of these, you can go to csis.org, hop up to the sandwich menu, and click on digital reports. We've been making this iteration of these for about 3 years, and I head up the production of them. So let's keep moving. So I would say as we're making these pieces, one of the big things that we come back to in terms of the philosophy is intention versus expectation. So it's very easy to get excited about the idea of these and then have a bunch of expectations for them going viral or them looking like the coolest thing ever. I think what really matters more is your intention for the piece, your engagement with your content, and just getting excited about the menu of opportunities that are open to you, but focusing that into what the piece needs and what you want to give your audience. So again, like, what are the possibilities for your story? How can you use those to connect to your audience? And just always respecting your content. And then a piece that I'm going to be coming back to throughout is selectivity. So I'm sure all of you have been to a Cheesecake Factory at some point in your life. The menu is about 800 pages long. You're not going to order everything off it. It's really critical to be figuring out what you want to whittle down as you go through the process, so you don't present something to someone that looks like somebody just learned how to use, Google Slides or PowerPoint for the first time and threw every single transition on there. You really want something that feels curated and like you were thinking about the audience. So a tiny bit about my background. It's a little varied. So I went to Tufts University and studied philosophy and film studies and policy. And then I went to AU for my graduate work. I studied global media there, which is kind of a combination of policy analysis and advanced production. But I would say the most valuable thing that I learned there was at a student job that I had, which was basically doing technology instruction for professors. So finding a bunch of teaching tools and showing professors how to use them and how that could help reach students. And as part of that job, we actually put on a conference very like this. So massive respect to everybody who is putting this on. I know it's a ton of work. I'm also just a person who's interested in everything. I think that's served me incredibly well in my job. I'm always excited to research new things. And I think if you can bring that to any professional opportunity, that opens so many doors. Okay, so most important, your audience. I think if you have the ability to do audience research, to collect a bunch of data about who it is you're trying to reach, that's awesome. A lot of the time, you're not going to have that as an option. So you're always going to be trying to reach multiple types of people. So some people are going to want to engage with your story visually. Okay, that's what this is for. Some people are going to be much more interested in engaging with data. That's why we are giving people things like this. Several people are going to be most interested in just getting straight to the narrative. You never want things to be fighting with your text. If you're spending months researching and writing, you want that text to shine. So it's all about kind of creating a holistic experience that's going to blend all of these and not have them fight. But your ideal audience should be somebody who magically wants to engage with every single aspect of this. So you never want to have things be overlapping, because then you're punishing your audience for over-engaging. I would also say that a big component of thinking about this right now is the responsibility of communication and access. So you never want to presume that somebody is coming to your piece with a bunch of prior knowledge about that topic. That doesn't mean being condescending and explaining what absolutely every single term means. But I think a good way to think about this is when you start the research process, what would you have wanted? As a consumer, what would have been most helpful to you as you were trying to learn about this piece? And then basically put a pin in that, come back to it a couple months down the road when you're so deep in this topic that it feels like it's coming out of your eyeballs, and then go back to that feeling and try to give that to someone else. I think that sort of connection and almost compassion can be a really good building block for creating good media. And then accessibility is also huge. This includes creating things where screen readers can access content, people with different visual capacity can still engage, working around color blindness, text visibility, all that good stuff as well. Also, your content should be perfectly accessible on mobile, because everybody reads things on their phones now, and pretending that they don't is just silly. I'm sure all of you have dealt with PDFs that are, badly photocopied, or sentences that take up the entire width of your phone. We don't do that. So that includes, just shortening your sentences, shortening your paragraphs, just kind of thinking about the experience of you as a consumer, and then trying to apply that to other people. And then I would say most important is make it feel easy for your audience. And the easier you make it for them, the harder it is for you. But that's part of the fun of the challenge. Okay, so let's talk about the holistic experience, creating that integrated story. So I would say there are 4 core building blocks there. You're going to want to create a data-driven story that builds on credible analysis. You're going to have a narrative that has flow and meaning and is memorable and well-written, and is also tailored to what you want to tell. Your visuals, this is cheating a little bit because it's actually split between design and multimedia, are going to reinforce the story, help access different types of users and experiences, and also ideally help with marketing. And then selectivity is actually going to be the most important of this. I know it feels weird to group this with your story and your visuals and your data, but in some ways it's the most important piece, because how else is someone actually going to access all of this if you give them 24 pages of content and 90 different visuals and a bunch of charts that don't work together, et cetera. So let's start with analysis and data. So the research process is absolutely key here. We are big believers in not starting with a narrative and then working backwards to find data that supports that. You do research to find credible analysis, you build on that, and then you develop your hypothesis and the rest of the process. That research process should include credible data sources that you've vetted yourself, and that are within a timely manner. There's obviously a huge issue right now with data gaps from COVID-19, but there are different ways around that, and I think even just building your own data sources can also be really huge. Coming back to that integrity of having done the work yourself to make sure that what you're putting out there is not misinformation, is not in any way misinforming your audience. That integrity is going to be central to everything else you're doing, because if you lose your audience's trust, it's not only in your individual piece, but also in your platform. And then finally, bringing that data visualization to life is so fun, and it's one of my favorite parts of the process. I would say that core to that is deciding whether you're creating a tool or a story. So an example of a tool would be essentially giving someone a visualization where they can toggle a bunch of things and create a narrative themselves. Whereas a story is where I've done all of that work for you and presented the most salient sort of elements of that data story in a way that is easy to access and that you can kind of just move through with ease and understanding. A really amazing resource for all of this is the Information is Beautiful Awards. This is basically like the top data visualizations around the world every year. Would definitely recommend checking them out. If I open up that page, we're gonna stay on it for the rest of the presentation, so I will let you go there yourselves. So that is analysis and data. So for the narrative, again, always thinking about that mobile writing style and thinking about a couple of ideal people that you want to read this. Write for people that you want to impress and for people that you are hoping will really engage in something that they didn't know about before. And also, I would definitely recommend having in the back of your head sort of a box that you can initially fit this in, even if it winds up overlapping with a couple of different areas. So are you creating a primer that's going to be kind of evergreen about a topic? So for example, the water security piece, not a lot of this is going to change. I mean, to be honest, a lot of it's going to get worse in terms of the data, but in terms of understanding this as a topic, this is something that can be applicable for a long time. Is it going to be a narrative that is about a specific topic that is, extremely timely? Is it going to be an advocacy piece? There's 1,000 different types, but I would have one of those types in mind just to kind of give yourself some guideposts as you move into this incredibly complex and often overwhelming process. And finally, I would say possibly most important in the narrative phase is not existing in a vacuum. So find people whose opinions you trust, who can read your piece, who can work with you on it, who can ask you questions and challenge you and get you to kill your darlings as needed. I think that's really what helps create an amazing story. Okay, let's move on to the visuals. Also, any questions so far? Cool. Okay, so design. In some ways, this is the hardest because it's also invisible. So when you're moving through a really interesting piece, a lot of things that the New York Times presents, Reuters has absolutely incredible examples of these. The design should basically be invisible. It's something that feels connective. It feels like a solid foundation for you to stand on to access all of the content. But it's really complicated and messy to make a lot of the time. So I really recommend always going back to the basics, the principles of design. I would say hierarchy, rhythm, and balance are probably the ones that I think about most when I'm designing pages. So hierarchy is basically what you're looking at right now. So we have a main title, and then we have a delineation of different areas of focus. Hierarchy is something that our brains love, and that when you give that to people, it is absolutely amazing. Rhythm, I think, is also really critical in a piece. So if I go back to this one, for example, you can see that we have regular headings that help people to break down this content, and that while they may not be exactly the same, they give you sort of a sense of balance and are sort of almost like a home base. You don't want to reinvent the wheel for every single section you create, because then that gets in the way of the actual content that you're creating. So just like in a song, it's that chorus that comes back. Maybe it's a little bit different, but it's sort of an opportunity to like take a breath and focus. And I think that rhythm is really important as you move throughout a piece. Finally, balance. Make sure there's white space in your piece. This is so important. I think everybody's looked at a piece of art or an outfit or anything and just felt like they couldn't breathe. You don't want your piece to feel like that. So balance and white space are really critical for that. I would say if you're really playing around with the principles of design, professionalism is going to come with that as well. But in some ways, the most fun element of all of this is the aesthetic. So thinking about the different fonts and your color palettes and your backgrounds and different ways that you can just sort of put the best backdrop possible to this piece and have all of that reinforce this kind of like holistic experience that you're building for your audience. So your color palette, this is a tool that I really love. It's called coolors.co, and it actually gives you the hex codes in the URL. Huge fan. And then again, just kind of thinking through the reinforcements, I would say there's different ways that you can play with this as well. You obviously can throw as much color at you as you want at something, but for this piece, which is essentially about new vaccines that have been developed to help mothers and children in sub-Saharan Africa against malaria, We decided to go white and pretty clean feeling for this piece because it's about health, but it also has sort of an overall soft feeling because of the maternal emphasis. So you can definitely have something like this that's still impactful, or you can throw the rainbow at something and really kind of have high saturation, high warmth, just kind of that overall feeling. This piece is essentially about the kind of economic connections between the United States and the Philippines. So I will also say that being able to customize elements on your page makes such a difference. Even if it's just picking up a little bit of CSS and HTML, that is going to open up a world of possibilities for you. And if you're interested in exploring that, I would definitely recommend checking out CodePen, which is not open. Yeah, there we go. So CodePen is a repository for amazing web developers and designers to create little elements and then share them. It is pretty much free, and I would definitely recommend playing around with that. Okay. I'm seeing, I think we've got one more. I'll wait a second before we close. Okay, cool. All right, so meat and potatoes, multimedia. So there's a lot here. This is not an exhaustive list. I think the biggest thing with all of this is to pick the things that make sense for your story. So, for example, in the piece about malaria vaccines, even though I think satellite imagery is super cool, that's not a good fit. Also, I would say that the US investment in the Philippines probably wouldn't be my top pick for gamification. Although honestly, I could maybe think of something for that. There's so many options out there now that I think the biggest thing is to just find everything on the menu that you can and find good examples of it where the type of media works perfectly with the content that it's conveying. And that'll give you sort of a sense for when things are working and when things aren't. Honestly, negative examples are even more instructive than positive ones, so finding the pieces that don't work can be really helpful as well. But I think finding pieces that have that synergy is super instructive. So an example of what I mean by things like photo treatments. So this is, obviously photojournalism is always going to be incredibly powerful, but there are a lot of times where photos alone are not really emphasizing the story that you're trying to tell in the most obvious way. So this is a piece that I'm actually working on right now, which I'm hoping will load properly. Yeah, there we go. So this is essentially an analysis that the military fellows at my organization are doing. I think this will load. Essentially looking at the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and extracting out insights for future conflicts based on that. So this was a piece where we wanted to take real photos from the war and then abstract those out into kind of a blueprint X-ray feeling so that we could kind of take the lesson and leave the individual context. We do a lot of other pieces about what's actually happening there, but this is not one of those pieces. So simple photojournalism wasn't going to be a good fit here. So what we do throughout the piece is kind of start with the realities of the war and then abstract that out. And you can kind of see how that reinforces the narrative that we're telling here. And also kind of fits with the overall color palette and the emphasis that we're giving to kind of the lessons and the takeaways. I think video can also be incredibly powerful, but should be used in a deliberate way. I used to be a video editor, so my instinct is always to use videos for everything, and that's not correct. So I think this is a piece in particular that really benefits from it. I think video is experiential. It puts you in the context of what you're showing. And this is a piece about the ongoing health crisis in Venezuela. This is from a couple years ago. And we decided to use mostly videos for this because it's such a dire situation that I think photos alone can feel a little bit surreal and abstracted. But video has such reality to it that you can't deny that this is a real thing. And this is something that we use throughout the piece. It's supplemented by data visualizations and analysis, but it's really grounded in these videos that give you a sense of just how crazy the situation is. So I would say also, I am a huge cartography nerd. I love using maps. Maps also need specific intention and specific application. So for example, if you're going to use maps in your storytelling, it's amazing if you make that central to a narrative that needs it. So this was a piece that we did that basically created combinations of different migrant experiences and abstracted those into 2 example kind of characters that we could use without compromising the safety of any of the actual people who experienced this. So it's talking through how biometrics, biographic data, entry-exit are basically being used to track migrants around the world. This is also a piece from a couple years ago, but remains relevant. So the way that we did this was we created two characters, Ana and Mariama. And Ana begins her story in Nicaragua, and you basically get to see piece by piece what that looks like, and along the way, what types of data about her are collected. So there's not a lot of like actual data visualization charts in this, but the entire thing is in some ways a data visualization. So I think getting creative with how you use any of these elements can make such an impact. Mariama, in contrast, began her journey, I believe, in Senegal and then moved into Gambia. And you can see throughout the piece how this journey progresses, both moving forward and moving back towards what they want to be going towards. And I think this is really how maps should be used in storytelling if you're going to be using a lot of them. Have that be something that's central to the narrative. Okay, I'm not going to go into all of these in detail, but actually I will show one more. I think illustration is something that is sort of like having a revival right now, and it's really an incredible way to visualize concepts that we just can't get imagery for. So this piece is about the impacts that the situation in the South China Sea is having on the wildlife there. It's a region of incredible biodiversity, and unfortunately that is suffering quite badly. So you obviously can't get all senses of biodiversity from a photo. So what we did was we took an illustration and then added layers to talk through kind of the different ramifications for each like life strata. We have never been able to do illustrations of sharks before or since, so this piece was absolutely a win. But I think just getting creative with the needs of your story and kind of not starting with what is out there, but what could be, is a really interesting way to tell stories. Okay. I think also something that is definitely really good to be doing with all of this is to be pushing yourself. Looking around for kind of different opportunities, excuses to build your skill set, and collaborators that can help you do that. So this was a piece that was about how the cocaine market has really shifted from the United States being a primary kind of transit path to Europe, and basically what the transatlantic flows look like. You can see also that this has like a very specific palette to it, but what one of my colleagues did was created this awesome visualization that actually shows you where in a shipping container drugs can be hidden and how that helps smugglers evade the authorities. You can click on any of these points and get some information about it. And this is something that we had never done before. And I think there's so many free and accessible tools right now, and all of the YouTube tutorials in the world. And so if you're interested in figuring out how to do something, you absolutely can. Just give yourself a little bit of time and try to find people who are also interested in it. Okay. So finally, selectivity. What does the story need? If you're feeling overwhelmed right now, correct. That is how we feel on every single one of these projects. I think the biggest thing is just always coming back to that central message, what really matters and what's going to matter for your audience. What do they need? What component is suited to what medium? And please never make anything just because it's cool. Your content is the cool part, and everything that it gets filtered into is simply a tool of that. If you do all of this right, it will reduce overwhelm not only for your audience, but also for yourself and your team, which will help you be sustainable about these because they can get very intense. So let's talk a little bit about making them. So our process, we are really research-based. We're a research institution, and that filters into everything that we do. So that includes not only the data and our audience, but also the visuals. So that includes, things like Pinterest, looking around at other organizations, what they're doing, trying to find new tools and new ways to use them, and be doing that constantly. Trying to research your audience as much as possible is always something that I recommend, but it should always ultimately be about the data and your analysis of it. So our style of making these is a little bit complicated, but it has been working pretty well. We're basically doing everything all at once. So we are running both the data component, the visual component, and the writing component all at the same time. We have a bunch of different people who are working on all of these things kind of simultaneously. And then, I am usually monitoring the project to kind of help make sure that it's running smoothly. So we do our outline, our Pinterest board, and our initial data analysis together. We do a draft of the text and style mockup, which includes the data visualizations. The locked text and the page production is happening at the same time, and then publication and marketing. So this is kind of how we've broken it down. It's going to depend a lot on how big your team is. If this is just you doing all of that, I have done that, and it's a lot, and I respect it. And it might look a little different than a couple of these, but it's still going to count as multimedia storytelling. I think the way to think of a lot of this is having a central base that has the requirements, and then building on piece by piece. Increasing by 10% is great. Increasing by 20% the amount of media elements is great. Each part is going to be worth it, and if you can increase to be, something that looks a little bit like one of these pieces, is 100% integrated, that's fantastic. It's not a requirement for telling a great multimedia story by any means. In terms of what our timeline looks like, we usually give about 8 to 12 weeks per piece, and we're doing 1 to 4 at any given time. It's occasionally been 5, and that was not very fun. But usually there's a bunch of different stages all happening at the same time, but these are asynchronous. So it's a really interesting kind of experience to be toggling back and forth between, like right now I'm working on the piece about the Russia-Ukraine war. I'm also doing one about agricultural biodiversity. Very, very, very different. But that's kind of the fun of it, is kind of be working on a bunch of different research areas at the same time. So the team that makes this, I would say our kind of like fundamental element is collaboration. We have people with a bunch of different skill sets, a bunch of different backgrounds, and I think that is the biggest strength. Show the pieces that you're working on to friends, family, coworkers, et cetera, who have different backgrounds from you, get their perspectives on it, and take their feedback seriously. It may not mean adjusting every single part of the piece to match their feedback, but if they're feeling that something is off, that's worth listening to. And I think taking that feedback as openly as possible is such a game changer in every aspect of your professional life. Project management is also absolutely huge with this. I believe I totaled it up, and there's 182 steps in our breakdown of how we make one of these. And I tried to screenshot it, and it looks like this. So if they seem complicated, again, correct. But with good project management and enough time and good collaborators, it's completely manageable, and it's honestly a really fun experience. However, to help your brain not explode, I definitely recommend having some sort of tool to help you with it. The one that I use is called Todoist, and there is a free version that works great. I basically just have one column for each product that I'm working on, and I can check them off as I go. Okay, so training this. We actually do a CSIS journalism boot camp. We do it about 6 times a year, and we actually recently had a cohort from the University of Delaware, which was very fun. And we basically teach them how to do this. We give them about a week with some research time ahead of time and some writing time afterwards, so nobody goes too crazy. And this is what we do. So, for example, let's see. This was a piece that we did with a Greek school that was basically about migration choke points. So these spots where in people's migration journeys, they get absolutely trapped. So a lot of the time, it's not even easy to go back, and they certainly can't go forward. And so what is the experience like in those situations? Great, and the map loaded. So this is something where, you know, as you can see, it looks a lot like the rest of the digital reports I've shown you, but we basically broke, in this program, we break students down into a data team, a web and editorial team, so they do the writing and kind of the overall design, a data team that does a lot of the research and visualizations, and then an audio team that creates a podcast. So again, we're kind of trying to reach all different types of audiences on this one page. This was a really fun project, and that program has been running for a little over 7 years now. And it's definitely one of the best parts of this job. In terms of media tools that I would recommend, we build all of these on a platform called Shorthand. It's very similar to things like, you know, WordPress or Squarespace. It's just, you know, kind of an out-of-the-box web builder. Lots of opportunities for different ways to do this, but that's the one that works best for us. We also use Adobe for everything. I would say the more Adobe programs that you can build your skill set in, the better. I would say on an average project, I use Premiere, After Effects, Photoshop, Illustrator, and occasionally Flash, but not often. You don't have to know all of them, but Photoshop will save your life so many times, and it's really worth it. In terms of where we get our assets, we have a subscription to a photo service called Getty, which gives us both video and photos, but there's a ton of free opportunities out there. Wikimedia Commons is gold, would highly recommend. Archive.org has absolutely incredible archival footage, lots of stock libraries, and then also contract with people, reach out via social media and see if you can actually just get photos on the ground. This process is a lot easier than you would think a lot of the time, and it can give you some really incredible content that no one else has. And you can also source videos from YouTube. Mapping, Mapbox in particular, I would recommend. There's a lot of free opportunities on there, and that will let you build some absolutely incredible stuff. And then for data visualization, we use Flourish, which does have some free opportunities, but I would definitely recommend HighCharts. This is a free library that lets you do a ton of stuff. Would definitely recommend playing around with that. Okay, so in summary, and I'll close all this up so it doesn't look so crazy. The 4 essentials, again, data-driven analysis with visual reinforcement, integrated storytelling that rewards your audience for experiencing more than just one type of content, informed design, and selectivity, not just because it's cool. If I were to give any recommendations for people who are interested in getting into this, it's just try everything. Try to build your skill set as much as possible, have fun doing it, and be ready to do that forever. I've been in this job for 7 years, and I know a lot more than I used to, and there is still so much that I need to learn, and I'm constantly trying to refresh and build that. But I think it really will help you at every stage. I definitely do a lot more project management now than I used to, and that works well because I can just jump in and help out in literally any area as needed. And it really just helps you connect to anyone else that you're working with on the team. And I would say just be in a constant process of tracking down what inspires you. I think this applies to not only creating multimedia projects, but also looking for different jobs, looking for different opportunities, like just constantly be looking for things that excite you. And then always be coming back to your audience. Again, I said at the beginning, you know, create the story that would have been helpful to you when you were trying to learn about this topic. I think coming back to that feeling of being overwhelmed and not knowing where to start, give yourself the experience that you wish you could. And always just kind of be ready to focus on like the intention of the story instead of your expectations for how it's going to be received. And I think these are just really fun pieces to make, and they can really help people engage with content that is very important, but maybe not anyone's first choice of things that they're going to read on a Sunday morning. So that is it for me. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so we're going to sit for just a moment. We've got a couple microphones. I think I'm going to switch the screen there for us. Although this is such a beautiful backdrop, maybe we should just leave it. My PowerPoint now looks amazingly bad in comparison to everything you just showed us. I'm on Team Canva. I can drag and click.
I love Canva.
That's about as far as I go.
I'm a big Canva fan.
I'm really impressed that I can even figure out hex colors. So we have just a few minutes here, just a little bit more than about 6 minutes here. Questions from the audience, and maybe I'll pepper one, maybe a brief one, and then I would love a question or two from the group. But thinking about, you talked about audience at the very, you said that throughout, but particularly at the end. Why? I think you may have said some of this, but why does this matter? I mean, the aesthetic, it's beautiful, right? The sort of graphics, right? The way in which you could visualize these things, help tell these sort of compelling stories. But do you know, how do you see the impact from the work that you and your colleagues have done, kind of in this way, beyond just like, that's amazing. I can't do that. You've clearly got a skill set to make it work, and others do too. Why does this matter?
So I think there's a data answer to that question, and then there's sort of a more intuitive answer. The data answer is that the stats are different site to site, but on average, people spend about 52 seconds on any given web page. Our average with these products are about 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and we have an average page view with some of them of 17 minutes. So the more time that somebody spends on your page interacting with your content, the more takeaways that they're going to get from it, and ideally, find different ways to engage with that content beyond the page, whether that's sharing or doing further research, or in our case, hopefully changing policy.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, thank you.
I would say the intuitive answer is because it makes people care more, and that includes us.
Yeah, I think that even as you were scrolling through some of those images, it's such a striking thing to, whether you're talking about war, conflict, environmental issues, being able to truly see what's happening can be really powerful. Great. What questions do we have from anybody? It could be one of these sort of wonky questions. It could be sort of bigger picture. Yeah, up here.
Thank you very much for the presentation, especially the tools, so many useful stuff. First of all, is there a way that you can share that presentation with the links and everything, or am I putting you on the spot right there?
So I can definitely screenshot it. Sharing is the only thing that this does not do very well. They recently paywalled everything. Can't blame them, everybody's got to make money. But I would be happy to share a screenshot, and that'll include the names and all the links as well.
No worries. I pasted the link very patiently through my lens, and then I got into the paywall, so no worries. Okay. I want to ask, from all the different, basically areas of expertise that are needed for such wide, the data viz and basic or design, research, and everything. How much is transferable to skeleton crew, let's say, team that can do things on a shoestring budget? And how much can you study and be a jack of all trades and do a little bit of this, a little bit of that? I want to take a page out of the recent Oscars, where it was a single guy who did this animation on Blender, free software also. There are some paid softwares there. And I want to see whether this could transfer also on your area of expertise. Thank you.
So I've kind of done both. I think the biggest factor is time. The more people you have and the higher their skill set, the more of these you can make in a year. The guy who won for the cat movie, what was it called? Flow, thank you. For Flow. That took him a long time. That took them a really, really long time. So I think it's something that is very accessible but requires a commitment. And that commitment, I think, can be very fungible, but it's either going to be more people or it's going to be more time. And unfortunately, I think there is a little bit of a cost-benefit analysis there of the stories that you're telling. If they are more on the primer kind of evergreen side, I think that's fine. If you're trying to like tell urgent news stories, you need more people. But I do think there's never been more free and accessible tools than there have been right now. And just kind of getting out there and exploring what's available is huge.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, back there. Get those steps in, Isaac.
Thank you. So I had more of a question relating to stress management. So when you're under those time crunches and you have so much that you're doing, I know you mentioned Todoist, I don't know how to pronounce it, but the thing that you use, but I'm curious more as to how you manage your stress in those situations and still produce such beautiful work.
So second plug for Todoist, huge fan. And the free version is actually great, so highly recommend. I think as with a lot of professional things, you are gonna have a much better time if the actual work that you are doing is something that relieves your stress. So for me, I love creating systems and I love doing design and I love reading policy, as boring as that sounds. So even when I have to do all of those things very quickly, the actual components of my job are things that I enjoy and that lower my stress. Huge privilege, but I would say try to move towards a field where that is the case. And I think like I get less stressed when I do the work. I think in general, stress management is something that is always better when you're kind of working with as a team. So, you know, communicate it, talk to your coworkers about it, do a healthy amount of complaining. But if you feel like you have mission, I think that offsets so much in terms of how sustainable deadlines can be. But also, I think ideally a component of project management should be being involved in creating deadlines that are sustainable, not only for the needs of the content that you're creating, but for your entire host of things that you're making in a year. Deadlines are not something that just happen to you. It's something that everybody agrees on. And I think the more that you can work with the team to create that sustainability, everybody's stress goes down. But yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the questions. Sarah, thank you very much. I don't know if I know how to do what you do, but you definitely made it more understandable. So let's give a hand to Sarah Grace. And so we will have a little bit of a break here, and then we will have our last event for the evening, the Byline event covering national politics in 2025 with Ested Herndon and Domenico Montanaro at 6:30 right here. So we'll see you again real soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.